Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Prompt Corner. Today we're talking all things assistant directing, so let's introduce our guests.
Hello, I'm Kat and I am the Deputy Director at Jermyn Street at the moment and have been a freelance director for the last, 6 to 10 years, depending on what you count between MFA training and BA training.
Awesome. Gabbie?
Hi, I'm Gabbie. I'm a theatre director and I've done lots of associate and assisting over the past 5 years or so. And at Jermyn Street, I was the associate director on Miss Julie, Creditors, and Tonight at 8:30, which was about 9 plays. So loads of plays.
And you, Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom McClane. I came into directing fairly late. I was trained as an actor originally at Drama Centre London, and I went to Birkbeck to do the MFA, and I was the trainee director at Jermyn Street at the start of Tom Littler's tenure there, and I did various projects with the building.
Awesome. I thought we might start by this AD sort of incorporates a lot of different terms. I thought maybe we could start by just breaking down for everybody what the different ADs are. And I know there are some that do apply here and some that don't apply here. But maybe we could, mainly just to kind of like put pressure on that distinction between assistant directing and associate directing, and obviously keeping it distinct from artistic direction, which I suppose is the other AD.
Yeah, I guess it's... You start, Tom.
For me, it entirely depends upon the director and the project and the venue and the size it would be. You know, if you're assistant directing on a new play with a two-hander, which I did with Alice Hamilton first at Jermyn Street, you know, you're really following the director's lead, and you hope to have a kind of a dialogue of what is kind of expected from you, and you read the room, you read the process. You may have to do some projects, bring things in, occasionally speak to actors, occasionally doing full rehearsals and bringing work in.
Yeah, and I suppose, supposing if you're looking at a programme, anyone out listed versus in other shows you have associate director listed, I suppose, it is all open to interpretation of the relationship with the building or the relationship with the director, but in, I suppose, really simple terms, assistant director is a slightly more of a learning role in many cases. So you're often assisting somebody of a very, much further along in their career than yourself, and perhaps your duties are just slightly less responsibility than perhaps an associate director would have. I had a show which had almost chorus of 6, so we were sort of co-directing.
I guess, I think for me, associate is always a bit more of a, most of the time you'll start as someone's assistant if you've got that working with, saying take on more terms, because I've been an assistant on productions and then spent a week running rehearsals in absent and stuff like that.
It's sort of luck, really, isn't it? Whether the show that you've been assistant or associate on does so well that it's going to come back, and most shows don't come back. So I think, I've only had the opportunity once, so and I feel lucky I've had it once in the last few years. So I think it's something that you definitely can't expect, but if you get it, it's a wonderful opportunity.
And so that sort of remounting, does that come as a kind of crucial aspect alongside the kind of assistant directing? That's something that you'll tend to do if you've kind of worked on a show with a director before, and that transfer of responsibility, I suppose, allows you to gain more experience.
That's always a strange kind of experience, because you're trying to do the show is but kind of already done, but you're trying to put new actors, or 2 new actors in this case, in a 3-man show, to something that's already been done in a very short space of time, to something that's very fast moving and fast paced. So it's a very different experience to kind of directing entirely when you're then in charge of kind of re-ensemble, I suppose you call it, yeah, a remount. But they're good. It's very good experiences to have when you're first starting out.
I found remounting was like a really amazing learning curve for me, because you get all the responsibilities and you have to practice and flex all those muscles that you need to do like a larger scale production. But you don't have any of the like artistic pressure of it like being a success. And if it's being remounted, you kind of already know that it works. So you can just literally just practice. Okay, why does that work? How do we get that laugh there? Where do they need to stand on the stage? It's like a real nice technical activity to do. Yeah, I really recommend it.
It gives you the confidence to kind of deal with different departments,
Yeah,
and see what the cogs of the wheels are being put together without the kind of pressure being on you.
yeah, absolutely,
you know?
Absolutely.
It made me a lot more comfortable in the theatre and confident I could do it.
Yeah, same. So I was associate to Tom Littler, who runs Jermyn Street, when we were working in Frankfurt. And then obviously he's an artistic director, so he's got lots of stuff going on. So I remounted the production when it transferred to Munich. But yeah, I feel like it ought to be a rite of passage, but I don't know if it necessarily is. I think it's these careers, like director, assistant director, it's such a bizarre career path that sometimes you might do it loads and then other people don't do it at all.
And how much of the assistant directing role comes down to something that, whilst it has that importance in the rehearsal room for the artistic sort of direction, how much does it come down to a pastoral thing at the same time? Is it a very careful balancing of those two sort of disciplines?
I'd say definitely. I mean, I've had shows where very much so, if I needed to be, with very large casts, for example, they need definitely when it comes to that, because it's just not the director just doesn't have enough time to always be there all the time in every sort of pastoral sense. So I've always sort of found, as an assistant director, one of my first things I try to do is just make sure the cast and the director understand I'm there for them both. And that is a balancing act, because you obviously are sort of the middleman, but that is kind of your job. Assistant, like you're there for the director, obviously to help them fulfill their vision, but you also need to make sure your cast are comfortable, happy, feeling that they have someone in the room that they can talk to that isn't also necessarily the director. There might be something else they need to talk about, or negative or positive, it doesn't matter, but just something, their life, there might be something going on in their life and they feel it's not relevant, but over lunch need a quick chat. And I think there's definitely a pastoral side to it. But there'll be some productions you work on where you never do a pastoral thing at all. Everyone just seems to be washing along happily, and there'll be others that just seem a bit fraught, and you have to juggle a number of balls between director and cast.
Yeah, there's something about the assistant role that does mean if there is kind of something niggling an actor, that you are kind of someone that is just. I think trusted is the wrong word, because I think they trust the director, but I guess because you're not essentially their boss in the sense, like you've both got the same boss, they feel more open to like sharing something with you, and then you can kind of filter anything that needs to go to the director and like the kind of senior creatives, anything that's necessary. Sometimes someone just needs to unload to someone that they know is listening, and someone that if there's a problem further down the line, you just might want to know about it, or they might just want to just get a bit of help and be like, do you know what, I was meant to learn these lines but I haven't, can I just grab you and can we go through these? So I like to really establish myself as someone that they can trust, that the cast can trust, and I like to just like really get to know all of them, because yeah, like you said, Kat, if it's a huge cast, especially when there's like, if it's like a big Shakespeare and there's kind of like the big leads, and then you still got all of these extra roles that don't necessarily have as many scenes. I think the idea of creating the feel of community within a cast is often really important, and a really important aspect of being an assistant, if that makes sense.
It can also be quite a painful experience, being an assistant.
Yeah.
I mean, no, we have to shine the light on that. But sometimes you do feel like, I certainly have, and this is everybody I've worked for has been absolutely lovely. But you can feel a little bit like a spare part, where you're wondering what do I what do I do now? You know, and it certainly taught me that when I am lucky enough to have an assistant while directing, is to kind of really you know, look after them and make sure that, you know, especially if they're younger or they're not used to this environment, but to really make sure that their opinion is valid, and that they're part of the process, because you can feel a bit awkward at times. I certainly have done. And especially when it's a small project, you know, you don't really know, what am I doing?
Yeah, you're looking at the watch, you're going, I haven't said anything for about an hour now. Should I? I don't think I should.
Should I speak? Should I make this opinion? Should I do? And then you're like having.
It's always at those moments as well, when you're thinking about whether or not you should give your idea from the last page, that the director will turn to you and go, what page are we on? And you're like, I don't know, for a second. And it's like the one moment, it's guaranteed.
How much is part of the role aligning yourself like completely with the director's vision? So I'd be interested to know, like, when you guys have assistant directed in the past, at what stage of the process do you feel yourselves kind of engage with most? I suppose, do you come on from the very beginning, and I suppose the rehearsal process is the point where I would presume you're engaging with it most, but what is that general arc like in terms of the way that your relationship with the director works? Do you feel as though you have to closely align yourself with the director's vision, or is it potentially useful in a rehearsal room sometimes to offer different opinions and different points of view?
I mean, I think it massively depends on the director you're working with, and I make it a point, like a very strong point. Birkbeck training did this, where, you know, you check in before you even start rehearsals. You make sure you've sat down with the director and had a coffee and got to know them a bit, obviously before, but also just really asking, what do you want from me in the room? Because then you go in knowing how, you know, and I always say, please be honest. If you don't want me to talk, tell me not to talk. But if you'd like me to give your opinions privately, you know, what would you like? And if you have that conversation, it makes everything so much easier. Obviously, sometimes the things that are said in those conversations sometimes shift because of the dynamic in the room, and you have to kind of judge it as it's going. But I've had experiences where actually, like during tech, I've felt massively more useful, because suddenly I've been asked to look at things from different angles, to give loads of feedback, loads of notes from it, which maybe in rehearsals we were never thinking about. So yeah, I don't know. I think it massively depends on the director, and I think that the level of involvement. I've gone from sitting in a room doing absolutely nothing, like knowing the director was like, I just learn, just watch and learn. I was like, okay, I could help you a bit, but no, all right, that's what you want, to being hugely involved and having lunchtime meetings and talking about artistic vision and sharing ideas, and being asked in the room, like directly in front of all the actors, like what do I think, you know? So I think it massively differs.
Yes, agree. I had a very strange experience at Jermyn Street, where there was a one-woman show called A Woman Before a Glass, a biopic of Peggy Guggenheim, which was coming over from New York by Lainey Robertson. And so it had been directed in New York, but with no set, no lights, no nothing. Austin Pendleton had directed it, and Tom had a very rough, kind of badly filmed one of it done in a black box. So we didn't really know what we were going to get at all. And then my task was a sort of an associate, but I'd never seen the show, was to design the set with the designer, right, and do a lighting plot, sound, like so it was working completely back to front, get everything organized, costumes for this woman, for this actress to come in and do the show. And obviously, and so I had to have dialogue with New York, with Austin Pendleton, send them designs. When we sent them the design, there were emails back and forth from Lainey Robertson. The design was absolutely beautiful, and once it was up, it looked absolutely extraordinary. But we didn't know what we were going to get until just before tech, when we sat down and watched the production. hoped, fingers crossed, that it was going to work, and it did. But that was a very stressful, back to front, baptism of fire directorial experience, trying to please every single party, and then it at some point pleasing nobody.
Yeah, I've oh god, that sounds terrifying. I've been quite lucky, I think, that I've always, all the projects I've been involved with, I've always been, as assistant, I've always been involved quite early on in the process. So, and that's kind of how I prefer to work, just because I think the idea of going into a rehearsal room and not knowing the director, just freaks me out a bit. But it depends. Yeah, it depends on the director. It depends on the building that you're working for as well, because some buildings can pay you before you start rehearsals to do loads of research. So when I was working on Rutherford and Son at Sheffield Crucible, I was doing like loads and loads of research, and I was involved in design meetings, and I was doing design research for the designer and the director, and like presenting that. So we were kind of coming up, I felt like I was like part of coming up with the vision for it, and I was always like included in those emails. But then I've also been involved with projects where at the point where I've joined, they've gone, this is the set, this is how we're doing it. And then you might join auditions. And I've also been involved in projects where on day one I meet the rest of the company, and I've just spoken to the director a bit before. I think it's just really important to remember that, I guess, it's like at the end of the day, it's not your project, but you are there for a reason. Like they chose you out, like there's not a shortage of directors, there's not a shortage of people wanting to assist. So there's a reason that you're in that room. And yeah, always if you establish your relationship and ask questions about the production, you're usually gonna like have the best time because you're the most clued in. And it's more fun if you know what you're doing. I think the worst situations are, like you said, when you're sitting there going like, why am I here? What's the point of this? That's when it can be a bit stressful, I guess.
But it's so interesting to hear you all say that it seems like quite a flexible role. It seems like something that, you know, this phrase kind of like, oh, it depends who you're with, or it depends what's in the room, or it depends what the process is like. And I'd be interested to, this might seem like a bit of a controversial question, but what that role of an assistant director, does it appear to you guys to fulfill a sort of stepping stone to becoming a director, you know, at some point in your career, or do you think that kind of flexibility of the role actually appeals to a lot of people for that sort of gaining of like multifaceted experiences in different ways? Yeah, does it have that sort of trajectory or not, basically?
It definitely can do, and I think that's what most people kind of set out to do. They think I'm going to be a director, and you train through assisting, especially like pre-Birkbeck and like there's a lot more training nowadays, like there used to not be any, so it kind of was the established route. But like you can make a really good career being an associate or being an assistant, or like a resident director is kind of more the term for that. So you might find yourself as a resident director on a big show, and that if it's running, you're just there kind of maintaining it, and I guess it's a more financially stable career. It's probably a better option.
You get a nice 18-month contract in the West End.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. I love that. But I think it definitely is a stepping stone. You know, it depends on the director. I mean, I would say it is if the director has an assistant, you know, and they are just starting out, then it is I personally would take it on as a responsibility to teach them and go, you know, and go like, this is the tech, this is how I run a tech, it's not how everybody else runs a tech. You know, that was one of the useful things of me assisting, was seeing how different people ran a tech, because a tech can be absolutely terrifying, you know, when you're directing something. But with if you have that kind of pastoral kind of care, I suppose, really from the director, then you'll learn. You know, that's what it's there to do. It's about learning, sharing. You know, you're there to absorb and share knowledge. You know, to demystify the process, I think.
I think there's something in there is no one way to direct. You can't teach someone how to direct. It's like teaching, you can't really teach someone how to be an actor. There's either something in you or there isn't, where you kind of have a natural tendency towards it, I think. And then training and assisting is a part of that. Is it teaches you the tools. So you have a massive toolkit of all these different things that you've watched and observed and learned, and like a magpie, pick and choose what works for you from who you've observed, because there'll be many directors you deeply admire. From the outside, you see their shows, you think they're wonderful, then you might be lucky enough to assist them, but actually in the room their methods really jar with who you are. So you can pick and choose the tools they're using that really work for you, that you could take on, and then make them your own. So because I think it's a bit like being an actor, you know, you can send an actor to the best drama school in the world, but no actor's going to come out, they're not going to come out the same. It's the same as directors. You've got to, I think you have to watch, learn from the world, learn from other people, and pick and choose what's going to work and help you personally be better, I suppose, and whatever that means in your own sense.
I think it's also really important to note that, I mean, when you're becoming a director, you're a director of actors. At the end of the day, the bulk of your work, the bulk of your time is spent with actors in rehearsal. So you can do as much training as you like and read as many books on directing and talk to loads of creatives and have loads of coffees. If you haven't spent a solid amount of time in a rehearsal room seeing how actors respond to being directed and learning to adapt to different types of actors, you're just, I think, opening yourself up to make mistakes in directing your own productions. So I think assisting is like really essential to just learn how actors work, and actors of different styles and different generations, because I think if you just do student productions, you can get really good at directing students, and then you might work with an actor who's like, I don't know, 50 years older than you, who just has a completely different style. And I think it's a skill that you really have to learn through just watching and observing different types of actors, and I think that can only be achieved through assisting.
Yeah. Tom, you mentioned that you started with that acting background. Has that shifted the way in which you direct, in the context of what Gabbie is saying about that relationship with actors? Do you feel as though it's giving you an insight into the other side of that sort of relationship, as it were?
Oh yes, I mean it yeah, it's given me a big insight. You know, sometimes I pity the directors of the past that maybe some that I've worked with or seen some people work with that have given the, you know, sometimes you know, I've seen all sorts of situations. I've worked with directors that do not like actors. They're a sort of a hindrance to their vision, which never really goes very well. And then I mean, for me, the actor is the sort of center of the theatre, really. I trained as one, and you know, and I teach a lot, so that's kind of that's the center of the sort of work that I personally do. And I mean, doing both has given me a much, I would say, for any kind of emerging director, do some acting, even if it might be painful and terrifying for you. You know, do some, you know, because it's really hard. And it's really exposing, you know, and to do that night after night after night, and to sort of, you know, some things might, you know, first days of rehearsal, things like that, you know, are really, really hard for actors, even really experienced actors, you know, and things, you know, things take time. On the other hand, I've learned how much the backroom staff do, and how much work is done outside, bringing into rehearsal. And I mean, yeah, doing both has just certainly given me a much wider scope of the collaborative nature of theatre, you know, and how to, you know, the director's job is really to kind of bring the best out of everybody, every little department, you know, bring out their talent, you know, and you'll spend time spinning one plate, and then you're spinning another one, And then once everybody's kind of doing their job, you can sit back.
Mm. And sort of to jump off that collaborative process, it must be a very valuable thing to learn, to be in that assistant director position, to be able to kind of have that pastoral side, to be able to have the artistic side, to be sometimes have to do things that aren't necessarily what you want to be doing, or have to kind of, you know, pay your way up in a certain way. Presumably that's quite a valuable lesson for engaging like in the theatre industry as a whole, in terms of the reliance on other people and kind of being able to see like how a process works, as you say, Tom, from a different perspective, such that you when you one day, if your intention might be to become a director from that assistant director's position, to have had that experience in the past and to be able to like have that empathy for everybody involved in the process.
Yeah, I would, as well as directors acting, I would say to actors, go and spend some time as an ASM or something like that, which I did do at Jermyn Street. I had to jump in one night for a few nights actually for Hand of the Baskervilles, and it's intense down there. Especially for that show, it was like being on a submarine. It was really, really intense, and you appreciate the amount of work that happens. And then when you might have the unfortunate experience of seeing an actor become short with an ASM or whatever it might be because something's gone wrong, you sort of think, don't do that. Just don't do it, but it does happen. Tempers get frayed, and in stressful situations, I've seen it. But I think if you've had experience in all of the different facets, you can go in there with some greater empathy.
I think it's so important to know the industry that you're working in, and like directors are the least qualified people in the room often. It's just kind of the fact of our jobs that we bring teams together, and like it's a highly skilled job. I'm not undermining like amazing the work that directors do, but we don't have any like particular skill. We're not like an electrician where we can like wire things, and we don't know how to like do lighting boards, and we can't necessarily choreograph and stuff like that. But the job is all about bringing everyone together. And if you don't know what a costume supervisor does, or you don't know what like sound number 2 does, you're just not going to you're not going to be able to understand like the ship you're controlling so well, and the team that you're leading. And if you don't understand those roles, like how can you do that? And I just think you need to find a way to learn about that. I was super, super lucky in that my first job in theatre was as an apprentice, and I spent at least 2 weeks working with every department at the Ivanhoe Theatre over the course of a year. So I did like literally a bit of everything, which was a bit mad because I'm really bad at programming a lighting desk. Like I'm really, really terrible at it. But I know what you have to do now. I'm even worse at follow spotting. I remember that when I was follow spotting for like a panto dress rehearsal, I got a note through Cans that just went, "Gabbie, can you be better?" I was like, no, I can't. This isn't my skill. But now I know how hard that is. So if like I see some follow spot that I'm like, oh, that's really bad, you can just like everyone's got all these amazing skills that you've got to. I think it just makes you a better leader if you understand what everyone's doing. So that was a really garbled response to say. Know what people do.
No, but I think it's a really valuable message, and especially like in a time like this, it seems like that's the sort of sentiment that we should all be sharing within a theatre community that doesn't necessarily orientate itself around buildings at the moment, but to have that sort of understanding of what everybody else does and everybody's significance within a wider sort of system seems to be a very positive and kind of forward-thinking way of looking at the whole industry as a whole.
Yeah, I feel there's one. I mean, being a director can be quite a lonely place to be. Whether that's being an assistant, associate, the lead director, whatever, it can be quite lonely. And I think that there is something about what we're talking about here in collaboration. I think during this time, the real massive positive we're all taking from this is we all need to talk to each other more. We need to cross-pollinate, if you kind of know what I mean, a bit more between us. So directors, I think in the past, there's some great groups. You know, you've got the RYTDS, you've got Young Bit Genesis Network. There are groups out there where directors can come together and be in a room or a virtual room now, and educate each other and learn from each other and just talk as people. But I do think that that is still massively in development, and I think that what I hope a good thing about this terrible pandemic, what's going to happen is we all need to talk to each other more, and I'm hoping that will lead to more positive change and more, you know, I might call Tom and Gabbie up, you know, to talk about our careers, to actually go, what are we doing with you know, what's happening now, how can we shift things for the better, or you know, which I think in the past, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabbie and Tom, but I've always felt that it's always felt slightly difficult for directors to be in a room together and meet, and for it not to feel competitive.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something happening now which is hugely positive, where we're just talking, like competition, because the competition's been forced to stop.
Yes. Yeah.
And therefore there's something brilliant I hope that we will all take forward, which it never existed in the first place. We're all completely different artists, we're all completely different directors, we're all going to make completely different work. Okay, there's not enough jobs for us all, but that's not our problem. We should be competitive about that. So I think there's something quite interesting happening at the moment. So yeah, I'm just hopeful, because I do think it can be quite a lonely place. So I'm hopeful that there is room for growth in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it can be, it is so lonely, and I think it's something that's not really, it wasn't ever really spoke about. I feel like recently there have been a few people that have come out, and there's probably some brilliant think pieces that can be linked. But as your position as assistant, it can be like you're kind of the director's friend. You're that person in the room that they can talk to and confide in. And I've had some amazing friendships start by assisting people. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yes, the loneliness of the
lonely, sad directors all alone.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's the loneliness of directing while in the room, but then the worst is the loneliness of the self-galvanizing to make a project happen or get work, or you know that, you know, I think that's something that the community, as you were speaking about, Kat, of theatre makers, we'll sort of, I guess we'll sort of broadly say, it is useful, you know, which is great that we've got these, you know, the internet and the resources to kind of to do all of that now. Yeah, that
was a lovely.
I go to a pub now and carry on chatting.
Can we not go to the pub?
Oh my god! Yeah, well, I mean, it's a virtual pub, isn't it?
Thanks for listening to another episode of Prompt Corner. Next week, we'll be talking to members of the Tempest production team. So tune in for then. It'll be the last episode of the season. If you want to catch up on all the episodes that have gone on so far, take a listen over on our YouTube channel and on all our social medias. And until next time, thanks very much.